That was a mistake on my part, no question about it.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge.
All right, hello folks. It's been a while. Been a while since I made one of these. So we have proof that former city attorney Steve Morris suborned perjury, and that former Boulder city attorney Dave Olsen committed perjury in a recent hearing before Judge Richard Scotti concerning my case.
Well, the timing, the whole reason why we're here, Mr. Morris, is the timing of the second complaint and the circumstances under which the severity was increased. The charges were increased in severity, suggest or raises some concerns to the court. The timing's suspicious, and that's why we're here, to allow the city to explain itself.
Stephen, my former attorney, Stephen Stubbs, actually made a video on this subject, and I'd just like to play you that video in its entirety. So here it is.
Boulder City Attorney Stephen Morris committed a felony when he filed with the district court an affidavit that he knew to be false. I'm just going to show you the documents. You make up your own mind. I think it's pretty clear. First, under NRS 239330, it is a Category C felony for anyone to offer for filing an instrument that is false. Category C felony. Now, this affidavit of Dave Olsen was filed by former city attorney Steve Morris in the district court. It was in defense of a vindictive prosecution motion, where there was a citizen who was protesting in a crosswalk, got arrested, got charged. Those charges were dropped. Almost a year later, he filed a lawsuit against the city. Then the city reinstated the charges and added additional charges. That is vindictive prosecution and violated the citizen's rights. So then, in order to defend themselves against an otherwise righteous vindictive prosecution filing, Steve Morris and Dave Olsen invented a story, put it in an affidavit under penalty of perjury, and filed it with the court. Their timeline's pretty clear in paragraph 6. Dave Olsen talks about how he dismissed the charges, but then he said he prepared new charges. Notice the timeline. Then in February 2017, he decided that he was going to retire. He talks about his paralegal that resigned. Then he goes on to say that he was reminded. He had already prepared the complaint, but he was reminded to file the complaint when he received John Hunt's civil rights lawsuit. If we move on to page 3 of the affidavit, Dave Olsen sets out that he then filed the second complaint. It wasn't that he created the second complaint in response to the lawsuit. He said he filed the second complaint after he was reminded by the civil lawsuit. Almost a year later, you'll notice his signature. If this affidavit were true, Steve Morris and Dave Olsen would have a defense against vindictive prosecution, and poof, they would have done nothing wrong. However, if it's not true, they have committed felonies. I want you to read Dave Olsen's deposition from December 12th, 2017, where he explained what happened. In the context of being asked about the second criminal complaint that Dave Olsen filed after he received John Hunt's civil rights lawsuit. Question: so what's this new? Explain to me your understanding of what count 4 is. Answer: well, as I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred, and that is that he interfered with a lawful activity that the police were attempting to perform at that intersection. And that is indeed a different violation, so I included it. Is it possible for both stories to be true? Could he have prepared the complaint almost a year earlier, had some administrative issues, and then simply been reminded to file what he had already prepared? That's what he put in his affidavit that was submitted to the district court by Steve Morris Or did Dave Olsen quickly prepare a complaint prior to the statute of limitations expiring after he received the civil rights lawsuit? Both cannot be true. One must be false. Dave Olsen committed perjury. Steve Morris helped with that perjury and submitted to the court a knowingly false affidavit. Steve Morris committed a felony, NRS 239.330.
So recently we had a hearing to see if my case would be reopened. Now, for those of you who don't know who I am or are just jumping in, more than 4 years ago, I was arrested in a town called Boulder City, Nevada. It's a small town southeast of Las Vegas, and I was arrested for protesting. I was crossing the street in a crosswalk, and I crossed it a shocking number of times. I crossed it 3 times in a row, and as a result of doing that, and literally nothing else, a policeman immediately pulled up to me and dragged me away. Now that might seem odd and a little hard to believe, but the circumstances of that was they were doing a crosswalk sting at the time. They had an efficient and planned operation to give people tickets that were going down that road that involved a civilian decoy, who would kind of cross the street just a little bit.
A police operative in an orange shirt walked back and forth across the road. Motorists who didn't stop were chased and ticketed. One of them was a Boulder City local named John Hunt, but after being cited, he returned to the scene of the ongoing sting and began a one-man protest by doing the same thing the decoy was doing. After Hunt crossed the street 3 times in just over a minute, Police Sergeant John Glenn whipped into action.
So it was a $250 ticket. And this is a very efficient system. They were getting about 1 ticket per minute with this system. So it was hundreds of tickets. You had many, many people just being pulled over, one after the other. I had never seen anything like it in my life. So, and I was given a ticket myself. So I knew how much they were. And I knew that people typically just, the average person doesn't have $250 that they just want to throw in the trash. So I was protesting police activity, is the short version of that. It was a nonviolent protest, and I was arrested. The charges were dropped after we recovered surveillance video from a local business that showed that the officer's report was not truthful. He lied on his report about the details of what had happened. And the surveillance video conclusively proves that. So when we turned the surveillance video over to the prosecutor in Boulder City, and this is still back in 2016, he decided to dismiss the charges. He did something called a dismissal without prejudice. This is one thing prosecutors can do, and it means that they can bring charges back later if they want to, within the statute of limitations. However, there are certain restrictions on what they're allowed to do. One such thing that limits the prosecutor's ability to do that is called vindictive prosecution. And this is a thing in U.S. law. It's a provision or a body of law that prohibits prosecution from being used above and beyond what the public interest is. So prosecutors can prosecute crimes, but if it seems that they're doing that with a vindictive motive or animus, that's not allowed. It gets kind of complicated, and I'm by no means an expert in that case law. The main essence of it is, if it seems that the prosecutor is using prosecution as a retaliation tactic rather than its primary purpose, which is just to be a prosecution, you're not allowed to do that. So in that video, Stephen was talking about the affidavit of David Olsen, and he's comparing it to the deposition of David Olsen, which was taken several years ago, only a few months after he filed those charges. As Stephen says, the timeline is very clear in that affidavit. Number 6, I dismissed the case without prejudice to allow me as a prosecutor to refile the case if I believe the evidence not yet obtained would establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt of a violation of state and local laws. Number 7, I prepared the second complaint against the defendant, case number 17CR68, after reviewing the newly discovered evidence. Number 8, I included additional misdemeanor charges in the new complaint after reviewing the newly discovered evidence. So what he's saying is he dismissed the case without prejudice. Then he reviewed the evidence, made the new complaint. Number 11, the filing of the new complaint was delayed because I was swamped without a paralegal and preparing for retirement. So he's got this new complaint written up, and he can't file it. Oh, Jesus Christ. So he's got the new complaint written up, and it's just he can't file it because he's so busy. He doesn't have a paralegal. He's retiring. He's really busy, and he can't file a complaint. But it's a completed complaint, right? Number 14, upon receipt of the civil suit, I was reminded that I had not yet filed the new criminal complaint against Mr. Hunt. Number 15, I filed the new complaint against Mr. Hunt before the statute of limitations ran. So he says in this affidavit, affirmatively, that he added new charges, and it's a very clear timeline. He added new charges, and he had this new complaint written up before February of 2017. Then, in February 2017, he determined he would retire. He was actually fired, but whatever.
Okay, so when did you decide to retire?
Well, I didn't really decide that myself. I was kind of invited to retire, but...
And then his paralegal also left. So his office is so chaotic, and he can't remember to file the complaint. That's why he didn't file the charges again. And then when he gets served with the civil rights lawsuit, he just remembers it's time to, oh God, I have to file this already written up complaint. So he files it. Okay. That story is so stupid and ridiculous that you'd almost have to be a complete idiot to believe it in the first place. I mean, it's completely absurd. He waited, basically, after dismissing the charges, he waited almost a full year, almost entirely. He had 2 days before the statute ran out. And then he files the charges, a week after he gets served with a lawsuit. And so they're trying to make up a story that this is not vindictive prosecution, that this is just, oh, I just remembered. Because it's not illegal if it's not vindictive. So what they have to do is try to make it seem as though he had no vindictive motive to do this. This was not vindictive at all. And that's what they're desperately trying to do. Now, why they're trying to do this so badly, I'll get into later, but that's what they're trying to do. And they came up with this story about how he was swamped. He didn't have a paralegal, and there were complaints sitting everywhere, and I just don't know what to file. So he gets a lawsuit, and then he files it. It's not vindictive. It's just, I just remembered. Okay, every part of the story was false, and there's evidence to prove it. So not only did they submit this knowingly false affidavit, he said in his deposition that as I was quickly
preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred. And that is that he interfered with a lawful activity that the police were attempting to perform at that intersection. And that is indeed a different violation, so I included it.
Yeah. In this deposition, he's basically admitting that after he got the civil complaint and he was rushing to file the complaint. Let me get just to give more context to that quote. At the hearing, this is something that Olsen said. Things were delayed because I was literally swamped.
Before the filing of the new complaint, there was a period of time when things were delayed because I was literally swamped, and I did not have a paralegal at that period of time, and I was preparing for retirement. So the complaint sat on my desk for a period of time, and then when we were served on May 31st, that's when I realized that the time was running out on my filing of the complaint, and so I filed the complaint.
So he testified that after he got served with the civil suit, that's when he was in a rush to file it. And at his deposition, he said that when he was in a rush to file it, that's when this new charge occurred to him.
As I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
So contrary to what he said in his sworn affidavit, where he had a completed complaint sitting on his desk since February, well, that's just not what happened. He didn't have that sitting on his desk. He formulated it after he got served with a civil suit. So they submitted this knowingly false affidavit, and that's only one element of it that's false. We're going to get into more, but that's one major element of it that's false. But what's really bad about it, this is not only did they submit this, which is a perjurious document. He signed this under penalty of perjury, and many elements of it are provably untrue. Not only did he do that, but he came into the hearing with this rehearsed narrative that was completely made up, and he spouted it off several times. So he had this story made up, and it sort of mirrors what's in this. He had this kind of memorized, and he was rattling it off over and over again. I actually went through the hearing and transcribed all the times he did that. I don't know. It could have been when I first got the report.
I don't know. It could have been when I first got the report. It could have been when I picked it up several times between then and when it got filed the second time. I didn't just do that final complaint all at once. It was stretched out over a year's period of time.
I had worked on that complaint on and off since we first received an order from the court dismissing it without prejudice.
I was in the process of becoming retired, and I had a lot of things going on at that time. I had worked on that complaint on and off since we first received an order from the court dismissing it without prejudice. I worked on it on several occasions, did legal research on the subject, and it would routinely get shoved to the bottom of a pile of work that I was doing. And like I say, I was trying to wrap things up in my office. And had it not been for the fact that we were served with the civil complaint, it might have gotten away from me. But the civil complaint reminded me that I needed to get that finished up and get it filed. And so that's what I did.
The filing of the complaint, I had been working on it, but it was delayed because I was swamped.
So the filing of the complaint, I had been working on it, but it was delayed because I was swamped. I didn't have a paralegal at the time, and I was preparing for retirement.
The new complaint sat on my desk for some period of time. I prepared part of it.
I prepared part of it. Please understand that during that year's period of time, I worked on it several different times. I'd done research, had done drafting, and so this was just kind of finish things off and file the complaint.
As I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
So you can see that he memorized this story. He had it kind of down. Every single time he tells it, he repeats the same things over and over. It's like he's been rehearsing it in front of a mirror, because that's what he was doing. And it's so obvious that, when you watch that in context, it's so obvious that this is something that he's mentally prepared. That's not something that you have to do if you're telling the truth. If you're telling the truth, you can just kind of flow with it. But when you're lying, you have to kind of get your story straight and make sure you get all the details out there. And, you have to rattle off everything you've memorized because it doesn't correspond to your internal reality. You know that you're saying a false thing. Well, okay. So he came in there with this fake story, and there are a lot of parts of it that are fake. In fact, every part of it is provably fake, or, just about. So, just to go over it again, this is his actual story. This is what he thinks, and this is what he used to convince a judge somehow. Okay, so he dismissed the charges. They sat on his desk for 5 months. Or he was picking them up, doing research on them, putting it back down, having a cup of tea, doing research. He was like trying to crack the code of how to file these charges for 5 months. And then he learns he's going to be retiring. He gets fired, basically.
I was kind of invited to retire, but
and then he forgets about the complaint that he made. And then he gets sued, and it's like, oh, I already made these charges, just gotta fix this one little thing and then file it off. Okay. That's his story. It's not it doesn't make sense, but that's what they went with. And it actually worked. The judge went along with it. So now, 2 years after he had my case thrown out, the case is back on.
The whole reason why we're here, Mr. Morris, is the timing of the second complaint and the circumstances under which the severity was increased. The charges were increased in severity.
As I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
Well, those things were lies. All those things were lies. Let's go through it. The first and most obvious thing is that in the ruling it says that he got all the evidence he needed in August. That means he had 9 months to file the charges. So 9. And now in February, so from February to May, February, March, April, and May, he was going to be retiring. So he couldn't file the charges here because he was too busy retiring. Well, why didn't he file the charges in these 5 months? This is actually more time than this, right? So he didn't file the charges in these 5 months between August and February. And nothing explains why it took 5 months to do that. But okay, we have to suspend our disbelief because that's the story that they went with. And then he said he also didn't have a paralegal. Well, his paralegal quit in April. So that's about 1 month of the whole year that he didn't have a paralegal. Completely irrelevant, but okay. That's the baseline story you have to go with. Here's the big problem. He said that 2 of the charges were a mistake. When he was being questioned by Stephen at the hearing, he admitted that 2 of the charges that he filed were a mistake. Stephen was asking him, because you can dismiss without prejudice to get more time to review the evidence, or you can ask for continuance. Stephen asked him why he didn't ask for a continuance.
Continue to have additional time to review the evidence from the Highway Patrol. The best avenue, at least I believed that the best avenue to approach at that time was to file a motion to dismiss without prejudice, thereby giving us additional time to review that other evidence.
Why didn't you simply ask for a continuance so that you could review the evidence?
I could have.
But you made a conscious decision not to, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. Why?
I can't say why at this particular time.
Okay.
I just knew that the motion to dismiss without prejudice to give us ample time to review the evidence and make a determination.
Did you hear that long pause when Stephen asked him why he didn't ask for a continuance?
Why didn't you simply ask for a continuance so that you could review the evidence?
I could have.
But you made a conscious decision not to, correct?
I did, yes.
Okay. Why?
I can't say why at this particular time.
Okay.
This is the testimony that Judge Scotti said was credible and convincing and persuasive. Anyway, but his reasoning for dismissing without prejudice was supposedly and purportedly because he needed more time to review the evidence. Okay, let's dig into this. At this point, there are 2 separate cases. There is a traffic citation with 2 counts, and there is the arrest, which is 2 other counts. Well, both of these cases were dismissed without prejudice, so they both go away. But for 2 of the counts, the traffic citation, he didn't need any additional evidence. So for half of the charges, this motivation to dismiss without prejudice, it wasn't true. Why did he dismiss the traffic citation if he didn't need more time to review the evidence? If he wasn't impacted by retiring, if he wasn't impacted by having a paralegal? none of the reasons that he gives actually line up with that motivation.
Did you discover any new evidence for the traffic citation that make your case stronger?
No,
Did Tara Thackeray leaving the office impede you from refiling a traffic charge?
no,
Did your pending retirement, did that interfere with you filing a traffic charge?
no,
Okay. When was the last time you even did a traffic ticket?
So number 6 in his affidavit is provably false, where he says, I dismiss the case without prejudice to allow me as a prosecutor to refile the case if I believe the evidence not yet obtained would establish proof beyond a reasonable doubt of violation of state and local laws. That couldn't have been his motivation, because he also dismissed 2 charges for which no new evidence was needed to review. He actually took those charges away from the regular prosecutor and said, no, give those to me. I'm going to throw those in the garbage. If his real motivation was to actually prosecute them, he would have just left them alone. So it completely throws doubt on his stated motive for why he dismissed without prejudice. Here's the real reason he dismissed without prejudice, and I'll let you in on a secret. Because I remember that hearing back in 2016. At the hearing, when I went up to be arraigned or whatever, Dave Olsen turned to me and he said, I'm dismissing these charges without prejudice, which means they can be brought back at any time. That's what he said. And he said it like this, which means they can be brought back at any time. Like that. Like that. Like, and here's the subtext in case my bad acting didn't get it through to you. It was basically like, don't do anything and you'll be fine. That's what he was telling me. That's what his motivation and his mindset was. So I hope that clears up the whole mystery. He knew that this was one of the most bogus cases in the history of the town, that I had been arrested for doing something that isn't even illegal, and he didn't want to deal with it. So he just threw out the whole thing. And maybe he was in a good mood. I don't know. But he certainly wasn't thinking of re-prosecuting me at all. That's why the complaint sat on his desk for 11 months without him looking at it. Some of you are wondering, well, if Dave Olsen was such a nice guy, why did you sue him? I'll get into that later, believe me. It's not so nice. And I didn't sue him for personal gain. I sued him because there's a very big problem in that town. But I can't get into that right now. I have to go through this stuff first. Anyway, so Stephen asked him, why did you refile the 2 traffic citations that you dismissed? If you didn't need new evidence, why did you bring those back? And Dave Olsen just admitted that filing those charges was a mistake.
Okay, so you had all the evidence you needed at the time you dismissed it on June 22nd, 2016, correct?
I guess so, yes.
Okay, but then you recharged it after Mr. Hunt filed the civil federal rights lawsuit, correct?
That would be count 1 in the revised complaint?
Yes.
Yes, that was a mistake on my part, no question about it.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge. If we had already disposed of the citation, and
So you admit that was vindictive prosecution?
no, I don't.
What was the mistake then?
So out of 4 counts, 2 of them were a mistake. Now think about this. We've already established that Dave Olsen said that he was researching this actively for 5 months. He was picking it up. He was typing things in. He was Googling. He was kind of writing notes down and thinking about it, putting it in his diary. He didn't notice that half of the counts were a mistake and shouldn't have been filed. 50% of the complaint was a mistake. And at the hearing, he realized it right away. But in 5 months when he was doing research, he didn't see that. That didn't come through to him.
that was a mistake on my part, no question about it.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge. Could have been when I first got the report. It could have been when I picked it up several times between then and when it got filed the second time? Yes, that was a mistake on my part, no question about it.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge, I didn't just do that final complaint all at once. It was stretched out over a year's period of time. That was a mistake on my part, no question about it. Filing that charge. I worked on it on several occasions, did legal research on the subject.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge. Please understand that during that year's period of time, I worked on it several different times. I'd done research, had done drafting, and that was a mistake on my part, no question about it.
What was a mistake?
Filing that charge.
Okay, so that is one huge piece of evidence that this whole story is a lie. He was not looking at this. He was not picking it up and researching it. It was sitting on his desk. It wasn't sitting on his desk at all. It was in the trash. He wasn't thinking about it at all. He admitted half the counts were a mistake. What more do you want? Then, again, we get into, he only added the only new count after he got the lawsuit. So that kind of speaks for itself.
So what's this new? Explain to me your understanding of what count 4 is. Answer. Well, as I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred. And that is that he interfered with a lawful activity that the police were attempting to perform at that intersection. And that is indeed a different violation, so I included it.
That's a complete contradiction of his story. If he was researching this the whole time, if he was researching this for 5 months, why didn't that occur to him at any point during that time? I have the answer. It's because he wasn't doing that. He wasn't doing any research. He wasn't doing any drafting. He wasn't looking at this at all. And it only occurred to him after he got the lawsuit, because that was the first time he had thought about it in 11 months. Nearly 12 whole months.
It could have been when I picked it up several times between then and when it got filed the second time.
As I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
I didn't just do that final complaint all at once. It was stretched out over a year's period of time.
As I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline,
I worked on it on several occasions, did legal research on the subject.
It occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
Please understand that during that year's period of time, I worked on it several different times. I'd done research, had done drafting, and
as I was quickly preparing this complaint to meet the deadline, it occurred to me that there was this other offense that occurred.
Then, another piece of evidence. He actually wrote on the discovery given to Stephen Stubbs, he wrote a handwritten note. And the handwritten note said, the reason he decided to exercise his constitutional rights. And before exercise, I believe there's a little air quote or scare quote. Basically, he's kind of mocking that position. Well, that is obviously a response to part of the lawsuit. I have it here. There are two pieces of this that will sort of help you see that. Number one, this is the complaint he was served with in May 2017. So we're trying to get into his mindset here. Number one, this is a civil rights action under 42 U.S.C. 1983, seeking damages against defendants for depriving plaintiff John Hunt of rights secured under the Constitution and laws of Nevada and the United States, and retaliating against Hunt for his exercise of constitutionally protected speech. Okay, then number 19 in this same progression here. Number 19, Hunt chose to exercise his First Amendment right to protest the police sting by illegally crossing the street in a crosswalk, thereby giving motorists actual fair notice of pedestrian intent to cross. So, here's the story. Dave Olsen, having dismissed this case and being such a nice guy a year ago, he hadn't thought about the charges at all. Then he gets this lawsuit and he says, I'm so mad. Doesn't he know I was being nice? I'll get him. Look, it says here that he was protesting to give motorists actual fair notice of intent. Well, I know his real motive. And then he went over to Sergeant Glenn's declaration of probable cause. He picked it up. He found the little thing that indicated that I got a citation, and he drew an arrow pointing to that, and it says, that's the real reason he decided to exercise his constitutional rights. Like, I know the real thing. He was trying to get back at the police. He picked this up. He said, this is the real reason he decided to exercise his constitutional rights. And then he drew a thing to the ticket. Now, if he wasn't responding at all to the civil rights action, why did he pick up the declaration and start writing on it as though he was responding to it? And I have no proof that happened, but he testified at the hearing that he did write that note after he got the civil complaint.
Okay. Does that recall your recollection of when you wrote these notes in the margins?
Apparently, after the civil complaint.
I mean, it really looks like he read this thing where I chose to exercise my First Amendment right, thereby giving motorists actual fair notice of intent. And then he said, this is the real reason he decided to exercise his constitutional rights. That either happened or it's multiple coincidences happening at the same time. So it either happened or it looked like it happened. That's vindictive prosecution. In my opinion, I do actually think that that's what happened. But there you have it. You have a guy going in there. He has a rehearsed, planned story. You know, he's rehearsed it in front of a mirror over and over again. He's gone in there like, I'm going to get him. I'm going to lie. Now, I'm going to go back even further because some of you, if you've made it to the end, you don't understand, well, why is this such a big deal? Oh, why did you sue them, John Hunt? And I keep explaining this. Again, it was not for selfish reasons. These people gave me a fake video of what happened to me. Now, if that sounds crazy, it is. I'm sorry. It is totally crazy. Anyway, something I forgot to mention, or I only mentioned in passing. Now, I know I have some haters in the audience, and they're going to be very happy that the case, that the judge overturned his own decision to throw my case out. Well, don't be too happy, because the week after that happened, it was announced that Steve Morris, the main guy who suborned this perjury, was going to get fired.
Boulder City has fired their city manager and their city attorney. Happened during the city council meeting last night. There was a 4-1 vote to fire both city attorney Steve Morris and city manager Alfonso Noyola. The I-team has reported on complaints about both for years. Boulder City Council members said both were adversarial, did not keep the council informed about important issues, and were working against the best interests of the city. Morris and Noyola had also sued the city, claiming they did not follow open meeting laws while firing them.
That's right, Steve Morris got fired. And after he learned that he was getting fired, he skipped town. He left so that he couldn't be served with papers. This is the guy that the judge bent over backwards to appease. So it was one fired and disgraced attorney lying, and then another fired and disgraced attorney kind of covering his back. When you see the chaos unfolding around this situation, is there any doubt that I'm telling the truth about getting a fake video? I don't think so. So they gave me a fake video. There was stuff on that video that never happened. They had edited the audio to portray events that never happened. They used samples of my dialogue and samples of the officer's dialogue. They mix and match it. They made a little movie with me in it. Now, it wasn't on the video. It was just on the audio. That's why it's easier to do. But it's still different from real life. It's still not a real tape. So, you know, that's the whole reason. And if you'd like to know more about that, great, because it's honestly, it's much more fascinating than anything that's happened in this state in probably its entire history, and probably it's one of the most fascinating things in the history of this country, and no one is talking about it except for me. I'm sorry, but all I can do is make these videos, and it has to be up to you guys to do anything or not. I'm just bringing you the story. I can't do anything else. So call the mayor, call the governor, call the president, because these people are they're just operating without rules and without laws. They're just lying blatantly. Now we have proof that they lied. But anyway, that's why it's so important to hold these people accountable. They prosecuted me for years for trying to get the truth about this fake video out to the world. Think about this. These fake videos are here. They are not a sci-fi concept. They are here. It's like the movie The Running Man, where Arnold Schwarzenegger gets framed for a crime by having the audio altered. Well, that's happening now. That has been happening for years, and there are several problems with trying to get the story out. Most of the people this happens to won't even know that they have a fake tape, because they'll just hear the altered recording and it'll overwrite their memory. They get gaslighted and they don't know that, they're not sure that it happened to them, and then nothing happens. B, even if you think you have a fake tape and you try to do something about it, few people will believe you, and even fewer people will help you. So you're on your own. C, no government agency is going to want to hear about this or want to do anything to, get off their ass and enforce the law. So you're on your own. So you have to sue, which costs tens of thousands of dollars. And then when you do that, instead of investigating the people who made the fake video, the government turns around and prosecutes you. So if you want to know more about these fake videos, how many there are, how many times they're doing this, what techniques are they using, well, I want to know that too. And the people who should be giving you that information have been spending the past few years prosecuting me for trying to get it to you. That's why this is so important. That's why they went in there and lied their ass off, so they could cover their back, so that they could continue to cover up this terrible conspiracy of making fake evidence, making fake videos. When does the lies and the evil end? When do people stand up and say, no, this is enough, just, it needs to stop? I don't know. But, I can only do so much. I try. Anyway, so, yeah, they went in there and they lied their asses off, submitted knowingly false documents, and I guess they just thought that no one would check or double check what they did. I wonder, why do they even feel the need to pretend to obey the law? They should just go around, if we're going to live in this authoritarian doom world, why don't they just wear Darth Vader helmets and just go around shooting people? Because it's not any step above that. You have this illusion of oh, it's a court and it's fair. It's complete baloney. It's even worse because it doesn't seem like what it is. So why did they even have to lie? They should have just said, Your Honor, yes, we did vindictive prosecution, but it's okay because the rules don't apply to us. So please just do what we want anyway. Why do they have to come in with this obviously fake story that can be easily disproven by just looking at the basic documents? Why do they have to do that? Just come out and say, listen, Judge, we're the government and we're always right. That's how it works. And then everyone will just stand around oh yeah, okay, this doesn't contradict with anything that I know or do, and I'm not going to do anything about it, so carry on. They could just do that and save all this lying and running around, right? It would not be any different. It would be the same thing. So anyway, yeah. Instead of prosecuting the real criminals, Dave Olsen and Steve Morris decided to prosecute me for crossing the street in a crosswalk, instead of prosecuting the police for making an elaborate and sophisticated fake video of me, which is a terrible, heinous crime that affects all society, and that everyone I tell about is thrilled to know about, except for the people in Boulder City. They need to be disbarred for that reason, and they also need to be disbarred for all this shit, for going in and just having this hearing where they're just lying their ass off. It's crazy. It's perjury. And you'll notice how they weren't even on camera during that. Isn't that nice? Isn't that nice when you're defending yourself from a crime and you can just be in a room without a camera? It's so good, right? That's how our country was set up. Every defendant should get that. If you're on trial for anything now, you should be entitled to be in a black box when you're testifying so that no one can see your face. Very nice. So anyway, this is my disorganized video. Check out my other videos. They're really good. You're supposed to watch them. You're not just supposed to sit around and watch Netflix. You're supposed to watch my videos if you want to know about one of the most fascinating stories in the history of this country. Or you can just continue to be a shithead. I don't care. Fuck you. Don't leave a comment. No, I'm sorry. I like you guys. But I'm not going to read your comments because I don't care. Okay? Do more. Call the governor. call the mayor, and call Trump or Biden if Biden becomes president. I don't care who you call. Just get them on this thing and get me my Nobel Prize. Thank you. Okay, bye-bye. Oh, and Dave Olsen and Steve Morris need to go. Goodbye.